This client owned 2 properties with family members, which had made him a bunch of money. But after going through the advice process, we figured out that it was actually costing him lost wealth building of $50,000 a year. In terms of the numbers, his income was $160,000 a year. Net asset position was $420,000 a year. He had 2 investment properties, both owned 50% each, one half with mum, one half with his brother. Combined value $1.6 million. Saving $30,000 a year, and with his savings, he was putting some into cash and some into ETF investments because he couldn't borrow any more money from the bank. His capped servicing was a bit of a frustration because he didn't realize when he was getting into these property purchases that the banks actually look at the total amount that's owned on a property that you jointly own, even if you don't own the entire amount of the money or own the entire amount of the debt. So because the people that he bought these properties with had borrowed to do that, the banks were looking at it like he owned more than what was actually his part of the mortgage. He was also paying a bunch of tax and frustrated with his tax bills. He was working on this contract where he knew his income was going to be higher for the next couple of years, but that wouldn't continue indefinitely, and he wanted to take full advantage. After going through the planning process, he decided that he wanted to exit both of the properties. Essentially, he sold the one that he co-owned with his mum on the market, cashed out on that, and the one that he owned with his brother, he sold the other half to his brother. He ended up then repurchasing another 2 investment properties with the same value, around $1.6 million. But because he owned the 100% of these properties instead of the 50%, he essentially owned an extra $800,000 of property, which, using the 150-year growth rate on Australian property, should give him upside of about $50,400 every single year. So that's in addition to the significant tax savings that he got from pumping up his investment debt and putting his savings capacity to advantage. He also did it without having to tie up too much of his cash because he netted out the equity from the previous property sales. Buying property jointly with a family member can be a great way to get into the property market sooner, but it does have some serious downsides in terms of your ability to borrow more money. For this guy, he thought he was doing all of the right things, but realized after that he was actually sort of putting a bit of a handbrake on his wealth building strategy. The lesson here is to make sure that before you go down that path, you understand and thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead so that you know what limitations you might run into and that you can plan around that accordingly.